When you think of Elvis Presley, what comes to mind? For many, it's the king of rock and roll, a man who shook the world with his music and charisma. But behind the glamour and the gold records, there's a story that's not always told with perfect accuracy. This story is about how we piece together the life of a legend, and sometimes, how those pieces don't quite fit. It started with a simple idea, to dig through years of interviews with musicians Elvis had met over his career. These conversations, captured for a BBC radio program, held secrets and tales that had been lost or misremembered over time. As I sifted through these memories, a pattern emerged. Many stories about Elvis, while mostly true, had small errors. The year he met someone, the place, or the specifics of an encounter would be off. It's like hearing a story so many times that parts get mixed up. Correcting these details was crucial for consistency, but I made a promise to myself: I wouldn't change anyone's opinions. The goal was to clarify, not to contradict. This project became a journey through Elvis's world, guided by those who knew him best. From legendary producers like Chet Atkins and Chips Moman to fellow musicians and friends, each person added a piece to the puzzle. Take Chris Arnold, for example. A guitarist who played with Elvis, Chris had vivid memories but sometimes got the dates wrong. He'd say they met in 1956, but it was actually a bit later. These details matter. They help us understand the timeline of Elvis's life and career. Another example is Albert Goldman, the author of a notorious biography. His book was like a whirlwind, full of facts but also full of sharp criticism. Goldman, a New York intellectual, often clashed with the very rock and roll culture he wrote about. He didn't always treat Elvis fairly, focusing more on tearing him down than telling his story. Yet despite this, his work remains a wild ride, filled with insights and misunderstandings. Then there's Peter Guralnick, a writer who dedicated years to telling Elvis's story. His books, especially Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love, are like detailed maps of Elvis's early life and rise to fame. Guralnick didn't shy away from the tough questions, but he did it with respect and depth. His work shows how much we can learn from someone who lived through the era. These stories, from interview transcripts to biographies, paint a complex picture of Elvis. They remind us that legends are made of real people, with real flaws and strengths. Elvis wasn't perfect, and neither were the tales told about him. But each account, no matter how small the mistake, adds to our understanding of the man who changed music forever. As we explore these stories, we see Elvis not just as a figure of myth, but as a person shaped by his times and relationships. The journey through these books and interviews reveals a king who was also very human, sometimes lost in the glare of his own fame. This is the true Elvis, the one behind the songs, the performances, and the legend. Elvis Presley, often called the king of rock and roll, came from a small place in Mississippi. This same region also birthed two other huge names in American culture: William Faulkner, a famous writer, and Tennessee Williams, another renowned writer. But what made Elvis, Faulkner, and Williams all come from the same area? It's a big question, and while the answers are complex, we can explore some ideas. Chris Hutchins wrote a book about Elvis, trying to peek into Elvis's personal life. However, instead of focusing on Elvis's relationships, Hutchins sometimes wandered off topic. Another book, Being Elvis: A Lonely Life by Ray Connolly, aimed to understand Elvis's thoughts by imagining what he might have felt, but it couldn't use Elvis's own words due to copyright rules. When it comes to Elvis's music, there's a treasure trove of information out there. Now Dig This and Elvis the Man and His Music are two magazines that regularly share insights and news about Elvis and rock and roll. These magazines do a good job pointing out mistakes in official Elvis releases and interviews. They've helped many fans, including myself, avoid pitfalls in understanding Elvis's career. A complete discography of Elvis Presley would be incredibly long because so many of his songs have been released many times. To make sense of it, we focus on chart performances. Elvis's records were often treated differently in the US and UK. For example, HMV in the UK wouldn't follow orders, much like the Beatles had their own ideas with Capitol Records. Chart rankings can be tricky. In the US, the Billboard Hot 100 mixes sales, radio plays, and jukebox usage. UK charts are simpler, based just on sales. Over the years, things like computer downloads have added new layers of complexity. Elvis's songs frequently appeared on various charts, including those in countries like Australia, France, and Ireland. In the early days of Elvis's career, his records were unique. Songs like That's All Right, Mama, and Blue Moon of Kentucky started his journey on Sun Records. These early singles, especially Milk Cow Blues Boogie, are now rare and valuable to collectors. As Elvis moved to RCA, his music reached even more people, with hits like Heartbreak Hotel and Hound Dog topping charts in the US and UK. RCA released several of Elvis's early singles in the US without much promotion, leading to lower sales initially. Yet these songs later formed the backbone of his first album. For example, Blue Suede Shoes became a massive hit after being reissued, showing how a song's journey can be just as important as its initial release. The story of Elvis's music is full of interesting twists and turns, much like the paths that led Faulkner and Williams to write about the South. Each of these men found their voice from the same region, shaped by its culture and history. While we may never fully understand the exact reasons for their success, exploring their stories helps us appreciate the rich tapestry of American culture they helped create. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Elvis Presley continued to dominate the music scene with a string of hits. His recordings were filled with a mix of rock and roll, country, and pop influences, appealing to a wide audience. One of his early hits from 1956 was Love Me Tender. This song was a massive success, reaching #1 on the US charts and becoming his first major hit in Australia too. Alongside it was Any Way You Want Me, another popular track. In the UK, Blue Moon paired with Just Because became a hit, showcasing Elvis's growing popularity there. In 1957, Elvis released Jailhouse Rock, a song that became iconic and reached #1 in the US. It was a rock and roll anthem that showed off his energetic performance style. This success continued with Hard-Headed Woman, another top hit that showed Elvis's versatility in music. Throughout these years, Elvis released numerous singles and EPs, extended play records, which had more songs than a regular single. These included King Creole, which did exceptionally well in the UK, reaching #2. His music was not just popular in the US, but was also making waves around the world, particularly in the UK, where many of his records reached the top of the charts. By 1960, Elvis was still going strong. His song It's Now or Never was a huge hit, topping the charts in both the US and the UK. His music continued to blend different styles, showing his ability to adapt and keep his sound fresh. In 1961, Elvis recorded Wooden Heart and Tonight Is So Right for Love. These songs continued his success, with Wooden Heart reaching #1 in the UK for 6 weeks. This period showed how Elvis's music could cross over between different genres and cultures. As the 1960s progressed, Elvis kept releasing hits. Songs like Are You Lonesome Tonight became classics, staying popular for a very long time. His music continued to influence both the US and UK music scenes, proving his status as a global superstar. Throughout these years, Elvis also experimented with different formats. He released EPs that contained several songs, allowing fans to enjoy more of his music without buying multiple singles. These EPs often featured his latest hits or new songs that showed off his talent in different ways. Elvis's success in the late 1950s and early 1960s was remarkable. His ability to blend genres and connect with audiences worldwide made him a true icon of music. Whether it was rock and roll, country, or pop, Elvis made each style his own, leaving a lasting impact on the music industry. His records from this time are still celebrated today, showing how his music continues to resonate with people around the world.